Good morning from sleepy number 6. She's feeling much better, so she said we could do your range of motion video today. As you can see, she is laying on her side. She's not fully lateral, but I have full access to that hind leg, and it's in a pretty neutral position from the hip to the toe, which is what you want to start. So, most of the time with an FHO, we're going to have a big incision right here over where the greater trochanter sits. So I do typically, depending on how tender they are, I will do some cross friction massage back and forth at 90-degree angles to that incision. I do find that because of the muscles and the fascia in this area, they like to get a lot of painful scar tissue, and the sooner that I can mobilize that tissue, the better. So I will do some cross friction to whatever degree they will let me. And you may need to wait a little longer or ice a little first this early, but that's definitely something to consider. And then as you can see when she's laying, her hip is in some degree of flexion, right? So the biggest complication I see with FHOs is that they carry this hip inflection the entire time they're healing, and then they don't want to put the leg down and fully use it. They either tiptoe or they carry the leg for a prolonged period following surgery, and they kind of decide that 3 legs is easier than 4, and then I have to fix that. So my number 1 range of motion is to gently work on hip extension. And hip extension is going to come from the hamstrings and the gluteals. So you can do some massage on your gluteals, you can do some massage on your hamstrings, but the easiest way to start range of motion is to put your hand, here's our stifle. You're going to kind of scoop your hand under the stifle. See how she kicks that stifle forward and flexes the hip into me automatically? That's like almost like a reflex, especially because it can be a little tickly on the flank there. But I literally start with these dogs just by putting my index finger kind of like down the front of the tibial plateau and my thumb gently, not gripping because I don't want to grab those sesamoids, but just on the biceps femoris muscle, which is our big bulgy one right here. And I just do a little gentle rocking, and I ask the hip to come to 90 degrees. And that's 90 degrees right here. And then I relax. And then I ask, again, they want to tense up against you even if they haven't just had surgery. So I do a little gentle rocking to kind of take that spasm out of the muscle, and I go to 90 degrees. So I would just work between whatever degree of flexion they're comfortable with and 90 degrees, flexion 90 degrees. And then once they start to get a little more comfortable, you can start to work back into actual, gosh, my blankets are in the way. You can start to work back into actual hip extension. So this is past 90 degrees to more like 100 and, probably 120 right there. And that's pretty much full extension for a hip. And you can kind of see like the stifle straightens out as we do this. And I don't worry about that. Like I let them straighten that stifle out. Once I can comfortably go from flexion, sorry to point it at her, but once I can comfortably go from flexion to 90 and then 90 to plus 100, like just out behind them. And it doesn't have to be full extension for an FHO dog. You just want to try to get comfortable going past that 90 to some degree. If they really, really resist it, it's probably a hip flexor issue. pulling that hip forward. Your hip flexors come from L2, L3, and they come down the flank. They're really deep. You can't always feel them on the surface, and they attach at the inner trochanter, and they do stay intact with this surgery. They can get really tight and really sore. So if I feel like a dog just can't relax and is just yanking back against me, or actually painful on extension, I'm going to come and make a line at the front of the stifle. I come just in front of it, and I gently massage in and up, in and up, in and up. And I will also go to their spine, and I will find each spinous process, and I will do little rotations down the lumbar spine. I might do some really gentle compressions on each spinal process. That's in a 90-degree angle to their back. The little rotations are either like a left and right, or you can do an actual circle clockwise and counterclockwise. And the reason we do these really gentle mobilizations of the cranial lumbar spine in these hip dogs is that is the origin of your iliopsoas. So you're wanting to relax the origin of that muscle that might be really tight. And if they're really tight and painful, you can't do this. Like, hers is fine. I can get all the way. In fact, I'm palpating it right now as it inserts on the inner trochanter, the lesser trochanter. So those are the things that I do the most early on. Once they're really pretty comfortable, she doesn't love having her feet touched. You can do more of a traditional bicycle range of motion with the full leg. And you can do that both ways. But when you're doing that bicycle, unless you're using two hands, like one hand just below the hock and one hand just above the stifle to support, like if you're only holding down on the distal limb, that's like a lot of pulling, right? So I don't typically do this until they're pretty comfortable and pretty loose and soft up in all these big muscles here. So your quad, now if they want to keep the stifle flexed and they don't want to put the hock and the toe on the ground, you can do some massage and some of that gentle vibration on the quad, because your quad is what extends the stifle and gets that leg down on the ground. So that may be a little tight if they're really not putting the foot down. But quads, glutes, biceps femoris, and really working on just that hip range of motion and some cross friction massage where the incision is as much as they'll tolerate, as well as getting that hip flexor nice and soft and getting your lower back moving with any kind of little mobilizations. So there's our side to side rotations. We can also do our little up and down mobilizations, or even just kind of some generic massage on that lower back can be really helpful. So start there, progress to the full bicycles. I have some tricks for getting them to put their foot on the floor if they really don't want to put their foot on the floor. But I would take the first 2 weeks to just really work on soft tissue work and range of motion. Alrighty.